In the heart of Paris, behind glass walls that have witnessed centuries of royal scandals and public heartbreak, hangs a dress that changed everything. Not just any dress, but the one that transformed a betrayed princess into a global icon with a single defiant step onto a red carpet. 27 years later, as museum visitors pause before this legendary black creation, they're not just looking at fabric and thread. They're witnessing the moment when Princess Diana declared to the world that she would no longer be a victim of her own fairy tale. This is the story of how one woman's most painful night became her greatest triumph, and how a museum in Paris came to honor not just a dress, but a revolution wrapped in black silk and courage. The morning of June 29, 1994, dawned grey and heavy over London, much like Princess Diana's mood. She stood in her Kensington Palace dressing room surrounded by gowns that represented everything she had once believed about her life as a royal. Each dress hanging there told a story of duty, of careful choices made to please others, of a woman who had spent 13 years trying to fit into a role that seemed determined to crush her spirit. But this morning was different. The previous evening, her husband, Prince Charles, had done the unthinkable. In a televised documentary with journalist Jonathan Dimbleby, he had publicly admitted to his affair with Camilla Parker Bowles. The admission came after years of whispered rumors, denied allegations, and Diana's own struggles with the knowledge that her marriage was built on lies. Charles had told the world what Diana had known in her heart for years, but hearing it spoken aloud on national television felt like being stabbed all over again. Diana's hands trembled as she reached for her cup of tea. The morning newspapers were already calling it the interview of the decade. Headlines screamed across every front page, dissecting her husband's words and speculating about the future of the royal marriage. Phone calls from advisors, family members, and friends had been pouring in since dawn, each offering sympathy, advice, or damage control strategies. But Diana felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a strange sense of liberation. For 13 years, she had played the role of the perfect princess. She had smiled when cameras flashed, waved when crowds cheered, and remained silent when her world crumbled behind closed doors. She had endured the eating disorders that came from pressure to be perfect, the depression that stemmed from feeling trapped, and the loneliness of being married to a man who loved someone else. Through it all, she had maintained the facade because that's what was expected of her. But Charles had just shattered that facade himself. By admitting his infidelity on television, he had freed her from the burden of pretending their marriage was something it wasn't. Diana realized she no longer had to protect a lie. She could finally truly be herself. The Serpentine Gallery summer party was scheduled for that very evening. It was an annual event that Diana had attended for years, always as the dutiful royal patron, always carefully dressed in appropriate conservative gowns that photographed well and offended no one. This year's invitation sat on her dressing table, and every advisor she spoke with urged her to cancel. "Stay home," they said. "Don't give the media more fuel for the fire. Let the dust settle before making any public appearances." Diana stared at that invitation for a long moment, then made a decision that would echo through history. She would not only attend the party, she would make a statement. Not with words, but with something far more powerful. She would dress in a way that told the world exactly how she felt about her husband's public betrayal. In her closet hung a dress she had never worn. It was a creation by Christina Stambolian, a Greek designer who had crafted it 3 years earlier for Diana's official wardrobe. The dress was stunning but controversial. A figure-hugging black silk crepe number with a sweetheart neckline that was far more revealing than anything a working royal would typically wear. Diana had loved it when she first saw it, but her advisors had deemed it inappropriate for official engagements. Too sexy, they said. Too attention-grabbing. Not suitable for a princess. Diana pulled the dress from its protective covering and held it against herself in the mirror. The black silk seemed to shimmer with possibility. This wasn't just a dress, it was armor. It was a declaration of independence. It was her way of telling the world that she was no longer the naive girl who had married a prince thinking it would be a fairy tale. She was a woman who had survived betrayal, public humiliation, and years of emotional abuse, and she was still standing. The hours passed slowly as Diana prepared for what she instinctively knew would be one of the most photographed appearances of her life. Her hairdresser arrived to style her signature blonde locks. Her makeup artist came to create a look that would complement the dramatic dress. But most importantly, Diana spent time alone, mentally preparing herself for what lay ahead. She knew the cameras would be waiting. She knew every photographer in London would be stationed outside the Serpentine Gallery, hoping to capture the first images of the princess after her husband's devastating admission. She knew that whatever she wore, however she looked, would be analyzed and discussed by millions of people around the world. The pressure could have been overwhelming, but instead, Diana felt a calm determination settling over her. As evening approached, Diana's staff began to express their concerns more forcefully. The dress was too revealing, they argued. It would overshadow the charity event she was meant to be supporting. It would give the media exactly what they wanted, a scandal to dissect and debate. But Diana had made her choice, and nothing anyone said could change her mind. She slipped into the dress slowly, feeling the silk against her skin like a second layer of confidence. The fit was perfect, hugging her curves in all the right places while still maintaining an air of sophistication. The off-the-shoulder design showcased her elegant neckline, while the above-the-knee length displayed her long, graceful legs. She had never felt more beautiful or more powerful. The finishing touches were crucial. Diana chose a simple pair of black high heels that elongated her already impressive height. Her jewelry was deliberately minimal, a pearl choker that had belonged to her grandmother, small diamond earrings, and her sapphire engagement ring, which she wore more out of habit than sentiment. She wanted nothing to distract from the dress itself and the message it conveyed. As Diana prepared to leave Kensington Palace, her sons William and Harry appeared in the hallway. William, then 12 years old, looked at his mother with a mixture of admiration and concern. He had heard the whispered conversations among the staff and understood enough to know that this was an important moment. Harry, just night, simply told his mother she looked beautiful. Their support meant everything to Diana in that moment. The drive to the Serpentine Gallery was surreal. Diana sat in the back of her car, watching London pass by through tinted windows, knowing that her life was about to change irrevocably. She had spent years being reactive, responding to situations created by others, trying to minimize damage and maintain appearances. Tonight, she was taking control of her own narrative. As the car approached the gallery, Diana could see the crowd of photographers and journalists already gathering. The usual red carpet had been laid out, flanked by barriers to control the crowd. Security personnel were positioning themselves strategically, and she could hear the excited chatter of photographers preparing their equipment. They had no idea what was coming. Diana took a deep breath, checked her appearance one final time in her compact mirror, and prepared to step out of the car. She knew that in a few moments she would no longer be just the wounded princess whose husband had publicly humiliated her. She would be a woman who had turned betrayal into empowerment, who had transformed pain into power. The car door opened, and Diana Spencer, Princess of Wales, stepped into her future. The flash of cameras exploded like lightning in the evening sky, but Diana didn't flinch. She stood tall, shoulders back, chin raised, and smiled. The kind of smile that had charmed the world, but now carried a different message entirely. This wasn't the smile of a victim. This was the smile of a woman who had just declared her independence. As she walked toward the gallery entrance, her black silk dress catching the light with every step, Diana knew she had succeeded in her mission before the evening had even begun. The gasps from the crowd, the furious clicking of camera shutters, and the excited shouts from journalists told her everything she needed to know. Tomorrow's headlines wouldn't be about Charles and his admission of adultery. They would be about Diana and her spectacular response to it. The revenge dress, as it would soon be known around the world, had just made its debut. And with it, a new chapter in Diana's life had begun. The reaction was immediate and electric. As Diana stepped onto the red carpet in her black silk creation, the assembled photographers went into overdrive. Camera flashes exploded in rapid succession, creating a strobe light effect that lit up the London evening. Seasoned royal photographers, who had covered Diana for over a decade, found themselves stunned into momentary silence before frantically adjusting their lenses to capture every angle of this unexpected moment. Arthur Edwards, one of Britain's most respected royal photographers, later described the scene as unlike anything he had witnessed in his 30-year career. The usually controlled and predictable world of royal photography had suddenly become unpredictable and thrilling. Diana wasn't just posing for pictures. She was commanding the entire scene with a confidence that seemed to radiate from within. The dress itself became an instant sensation. Every detail was perfect for maximum impact. The way it hugged her figure showcased the hours Diana had spent working out, transforming her body from the soft curves of early motherhood into the toned physique of a woman who had found strength through adversity. The off-the-shoulder design was daringly sophisticated, revealing enough to be striking while maintaining the elegance expected of a princess. But it wasn't just the dress that captivated the crowd. It was Diana herself. Her posture was different from the slightly hunched, almost apologetic stance she had often adopted in earlier years. Now she stood tall and proud, her chin lifted with defiance and determination. Her smile was radiant but carried an edge of steel that hadn't been there before. This was a woman who had been pushed to her breaking point and had emerged stronger rather than broken. Inside the gallery, the reaction among guests was equally dramatic. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as Diana entered the room. The usual polite applause that greeted royal arrivals was replaced by an almost stunned silence, followed by animated whispers that rippled through the crowd like waves. Society figures, artists, and celebrities who had known Diana for years found themselves seeing her in an entirely new light. Serena Stanhope, a close friend who had been with Diana during some of her darkest moments, was among the first to approach her that evening. Years later, she would recall being struck not just by how stunning Diana looked, but by the transformation in her demeanor. There was a lightness about her that hadn't been present in months, a sense of freedom that seemed to emanate from her every movement. The international media response was unprecedented. Within hours, images of Diana in the black dress were being transmitted around the world. News organizations that had planned to lead with Charles's confession found themselves scrambling to redesign their front pages. The princess had managed to completely shift the narrative with nothing more than a perfectly chosen outfit and impeccable timing. In New York, newspaper editors were calling emergency meetings. The New York Post's front page team worked through the night to create what would become one of their most famous headlines, the revenge dress. The term stuck immediately, capturing both the audacity of Diana's choice and the brilliance of her timing. Other publications followed suit, with headlines ranging from Diana's night to The Princess Strikes Back. Television networks around the world scrambled to obtain the best images and interviews from the event. CNN devoted significant coverage to what they called Princess Diana's fashion statement heard round the world. The BBC, typically restrained in their royal coverage, found themselves dedicating primetime segments to analysing not just the dress, but what it represented in terms of Diana's emotional journey. Fashion experts were equally captivated. Anna Wintour, editor of American Vogue, would later describe the moment as one of the most significant in fashion history, not because of the dress itself, but because of how Diana used fashion as a form of communication. The choice to wear black, traditionally associated with mourning, sent a clear message about the death of her marriage. The revealing cut suggested a woman ready to embrace her sexuality and independence. Every element had been carefully considered to create maximum impact. Christina Stambolian, the designer who had created the dress 3 years earlier, found herself thrust into the international spotlight. Journalists tracked her down at her London atelier, where she expressed amazement at seeing her creation worn with such powerful effect. She revealed that the dress had been designed specifically for Diana, but had been deemed too controversial for official royal engagements. The irony that it took a personal crisis for the dress to finally see the light of day was not lost on anyone. The fashion industry's response was immediate and enthusiastic. Orders for similar dresses poured into designer studios across London and beyond. The revenge dress became a template, copied and adapted by women who wanted to channel Diana's newfound confidence in their own lives. Department stores reported unprecedented demand for black form-fitting dresses, particularly those with off-the-shoulder designs. But the impact extended far beyond fashion. Women around the world saw Diana's appearance as a masterclass in reclaiming personal power after betrayal. Support groups for divorced women reported increased membership in the weeks following the Serpentine Gallery event. Therapists noted that many of their female clients referenced Diana's transformation as inspiration for their own journeys toward independence and self-empowerment. The royal establishment's reaction was more complex and conflicted. Privately, many courtiers admired Diana's strategic brilliance in shifting the conversation away from Charles's admission. However, they were also concerned about the precedent it set. The monarchy had always relied on careful control of image and message. Diana's spontaneous act of defiance suggested that this control might be slipping away. Queen Elizabeth II's response was characteristically measured and diplomatic. While she made no public comment about the dress or Diana's appearance, palace sources suggested that she understood her daughter-in-law's need to assert herself in the face of public humiliation. The Queen, who had navigated her own share of royal scandals and family crises, recognized strategic thinking when she saw it. Charles himself was reportedly stunned by the global reaction to Diana's appearance. Friends close to him revealed that he had expected his television confession to dominate the news cycle for weeks. Instead, it was overshadowed within hours by his wife's brilliant countermove. The prince found himself in the unusual position of having his own major announcement upstaged by a dress. The psychological impact on Diana was profound and transformative. For years, she had felt powerless in her marriage and her role as a royal. Every decision, from her clothing choices to her public appearances, had been subject to approval from advisors and palace officials. The success of her revenge dress moment showed her that she had more control over her public image than she had realized. Friends who saw Diana in the days following the Serpentine Gallery event noted a significant change in her confidence and demeanor. She walked taller, spoke with more authority, and seemed to have discovered an inner strength that had been suppressed for too long. The woman who had once been paralyzed by eating disorders and depression was beginning to emerge as a force to be reckoned with. The dress itself took on almost mythical status in the days and weeks that followed. Fashion historians began discussing it in the same breath as other iconic garments. Marilyn Monroe's white subway dress, Audrey Hepburn's little black dress from Breakfast at Tiffany's, Elizabeth Hurley's safety pin dress. But Diana's creation was different because it represented more than just a fashion moment. It was a declaration of independence, an act of rebellion, and a masterpiece of strategic communication, all wrapped up in black silk. Media analysts began studying the event as a case study in crisis management and public relations. Diana had managed to transform what should have been one of the worst nights of her public life into one of her greatest triumphs. She had taken control of a narrative that was spiraling away from her and redirected it entirely through the simple but brilliant act of wearing the right dress at the right moment. The evening at the Serpentine Gallery continued with Diana mingling confidently among the guests, accepting compliments on her appearance with grace and poise. She spoke with artists about their work, chatted with fellow patrons about the gallery's future plans, and generally behaved as though this was just another royal engagement. But everyone present understood they were witnessing something historic. As the evening drew to a close and Diana prepared to leave, the photographers were still waiting outside, hoping for one final shot of the woman who had just redefined what it meant to be a royal in crisis. Diana didn't disappoint. She emerged from the gallery with the same confidence she had displayed upon arrival, pausing briefly to allow the cameras to capture her one more time before stepping into her waiting car. A Bayaby's public station. Rising to a debuting this debut win. A Bayaby's public station. In Rias would Davy. Televised writing to the baby win. Dane Timberpool. In the power of personal reinvention. Baby's public station. Diana had shown the world that sometimes the best response to betrayal isn't tears or anger, but a perfectly chosen outfit and the confidence to wear it. In the months and years that followed Diana's triumphant appearance at the Serpentine Gallery, the revenge dress became more than just a fashion moment. It evolved into a cultural phenomenon that influenced everything from women's empowerment movements to the way the royal family approached public relations. The ripple effects of that single evening continued to spread across the globe, touching lives in ways Diana could never have imagined. The immediate aftermath saw Diana's confidence soar to unprecedented heights. Having witnessed firsthand the power she wielded over public opinion, she began to approach her royal duties with a new sense of purpose and independence. Palace officials, who had grown accustomed to a more compliant Diana, suddenly found themselves dealing with a princess who was willing to challenge protocol and make her own decisions about her public image. This newfound assertiveness manifested in various ways throughout 1994 and 1995. Diana began choosing her own outfits for public engagements, often selecting pieces that were more fashion-forward and personally expressive than the conservative suits and dresses she had previously worn. She started accepting invitations to events that interested her personally, rather than simply fulfilling obligations chosen by palace schedulers. Most significantly, she began speaking more freely with journalists, granting interviews that revealed her thoughts and feelings with unprecedented candor. The fashion industry, meanwhile, was still reeling from the impact of the revenge dress. Christina Stambolian found her career transformed overnight. The Greek designer, who had previously been known mainly within London fashion circles, suddenly had a waiting list of international clients wanting their own version of Diana's empowerment dress. She was invited to fashion weeks in Paris, Milan, and New York, where she spoke about the philosophy behind her designs and the importance of clothing as self-expression. Other designers took note of the revenge dress phenomenon and began creating their own versions of empowering women's wear. The concept of the power dress evolved beyond the shoulder-padded business suits of the 1980s to include more feminine but equally confident silhouettes. Black became the color of choice for women making statements, and off-the-shoulder designs experienced a revival that lasted well into the 2000s. The psychological impact of Diana's revenge dress moment extended far beyond the fashion world. Therapists and counselors began noting an increase in clients who referenced Diana's transformation as inspiration for their own journeys towards self-empowerment. The image of a woman taking control of her narrative after public humiliation resonated with countless individuals who had experienced betrayal, divorce, or other personal crises. Women's magazines around the world published article after article analyzing the revenge dress phenomenon and offering advice on how readers could channel Diana's confidence in their own lives. The concept of using fashion as a form of communication and self-assertion became a regular topic in lifestyle publications. Readers shared their own stories of transformative outfit choices that had helped them reclaim their power in difficult situations. The media's fascination with Diana only intensified after the revenge dress moment. Photographers who had covered her for years noted a fundamental change in how she presented herself to the cameras. Gone was the shy, downward-looking princess of the early years. In her place was a confident woman who knew exactly how to work with the media to her advantage. Diana had learned that she could be a collaborator in her own image-making rather than simply a subject. This shift in media dynamics had profound implications for the royal family as an institution. For decades, the monarchy had maintained strict control over how its members were presented to the public. Official portraits, carefully staged photo opportunities, and limited access interviews had been the norm. Diana's successful manipulation of media attention through strategic fashion choices demonstrated that individual royals could wield significant influence independent of official palace channels. The Queen and her advisors watched these developments with a mixture of admiration and concern. While they appreciated Diana's ability to generate positive publicity for the royal family, they worried about the precedent being set. If one royal could successfully challenge established protocols and generate massive public support, what would prevent others from doing the same? The revenge dress had inadvertently highlighted the tension between individual expression and institutional conformity that would continue to challenge the monarchy for years to come. Prince Charles, meanwhile, struggled to regain his footing in the wake of Diana's fashion triumph. His admission of adultery, which should have dominated headlines for weeks, had been overshadowed within hours by his wife's strategic response. The prince found himself in the unusual position of being upstaged, not by another scandal or political crisis, but by a dress. Palace insiders reported that Charles was both impressed by Diana's tactical brilliance and frustrated by his inability to compete with her natural media savvy. The revenge dress also marked a turning point in Diana's relationship with her sons, William and Harry. Both boys, who were becoming increasingly aware of their parents' troubled marriage and the public scrutiny surrounding their family, watched their mother reclaim her power with a mixture of pride and amazement. William, in particular, began to understand that his mother was not just a victim of circumstances, but a strategic thinker capable of shaping her own destiny. This realization would prove crucial in the years that followed. As Diana continued to use her public platform to champion causes she cared about, her work with AIDS patients, landmine victims, and homeless individuals took on new intensity and effectiveness after the revenge dress moment. Having demonstrated her ability to command global attention, Diana leveraged that power to shine light on issues that might otherwise have been ignored. The international impact of the revenge dress extended beyond Britain's borders. Fashion historians in France began including it in their studies of significant couture moments. American designers incorporated elements of its design into their own collections. Even in countries with different cultural attitudes toward women's fashion, the story of Diana's empowering dress choice resonated with women seeking to assert their independence. Academic studies began emerging that examined the revenge dress as a case study in nonverbal communication and visual rhetoric. Sociology professors used it to illustrate how clothing choices can be forms of political and personal expression. Communication scholars analyzed how Diana had managed to shift an entire news cycle through strategic image management. The dress became a teaching tool in courses ranging from women's studies to public relations. The entertainment industry also took note of the revenge dress phenomenon. Television shows and movies began featuring characters who used fashion as a form of empowerment after betrayal or crisis. The concept of the revenge makeover became a staple of reality television programming. Diana's transformation story was referenced in countless films and books about women overcoming adversity. As the years passed, the revenge dress began to take on almost mythical status in popular culture. It was featured in exhibitions about fashion and feminism, referenced in songs and poetry, and became a symbol of female empowerment that transcended its original context. Young women who hadn't even been born when Diana wore the dress began learning about it through social media and online fashion blogs. The dress itself, meanwhile, had been carefully preserved in Diana's wardrobe at Kensington Palace. After her death in 1997, it became one of the most requested items for public display. Museums around the world inquired about borrowing it for exhibitions about fashion, feminism, or the princess herself. The Spencer family, who inherited Diana's personal effects, faced constant requests to loan the dress for various commemorative events and exhibitions. Fashion conservators studied the dress to understand how best to preserve it for future generations. The silk crepe had held up remarkably well, testament to both the quality of the original construction and the careful storage it had received. Every detail was documented and photographed, from the precise cut of the neckline to the way the fabric fell at the hemline. The dress had become a historical artifact, worthy of the same careful treatment given to museum pieces. The influence of the revenge dress could be seen in countless subsequent fashion moments. Celebrities going through public breakups or scandals began choosing their red carpet outfits with Diana's example in mind. The concept of using fashion to send a message became so common that fashion critics coined the term the Diana effect to describe moments when clothing choices generated more headlines than the events themselves. Even decades later, fashion editors and stylists continued to reference the revenge dress when working with clients who wanted to make powerful statements through their clothing choices. The fundamental lessons of Diana's strategic fashion moment remained relevant: the importance of timing, the power of confidence, and the way the right outfit can transform a victim into a victor. The revenge dress had proven that sometimes the most powerful responses to betrayal and humiliation don't involve words at all. Sometimes they involve silk, confidence, and the courage to step into the spotlight exactly as you are. Consequences be damned. Diana's lesson resonated across generations, cultures, and circumstances, proving that the power of personal transformation is truly universal.